Thanks for coming. It's a lovely day out there, so I know what the challenge is to be in here, stuck, listening to us. But I promise I'll make it worth your time. So my name is Chris. I'll spare you the rest of the introductions. I work for Microsoft, and yes, I'm really passionate about open source. Lots of people working at Microsoft these days are passionate about open source. And the purpose of this talk is actually to get you up to speed on what you need to do to get started with open source. So how many of you do open source here? How many of you would like to do open source, but you have no idea how to get started? Oh, well, somebody had to start somewhere, so that was me. Okay, so the things that we'll cover today is what do you need to know, why you care about open source, what do you need to know when you get started with open source, and if you're already a maintainer maybe of a project, maybe how we can make you an even better maintainer, okay? So let's get started. Why should you care about open source? First thing, your friends will think that you're a hacker, right? When I thought about open source, it was all about Linux kernels and things like that, and I never thought in my 12 years of a developer that I'll be able to contribute to open source. So it's very cool. People, you'll think that you're doing crazy stuff, even all you're doing is just contributing to documentation, for example. Yeah, that still counts as open source, I'll tell you that. And second thing, you're going to get some really good relationships out there. You're going to make some new friends, and you're going to build your network. It's going to help you going forward with finding answers to problems that you might not have had before. So my experience throughout open source got me closer to some of the people that are actually speaking here today, and I met them through open source. Third one, you actually going to become a better developer. Well, hopefully if you get the feedback back from more senior developers. So the idea is that you start contributing and you get some feedback when you send pull requests, and you look into how other people write code, and you get the lessons for that and you bring them into your own environment. So you become a better developer. Also, if you are a maintainer of a project, you're probably going to get feedback from the community when they use your software, and that will force you into working with that community and becoming better. And lastly, which was my selfish way of getting into open source, you get free stuff. Yes, lots of companies out there that will give you free software because you're doing open source. So companies like ReSharper, JetBrains, Redgate will also give you stuff. Xamarin used to give you almost $2,000 worth of free software just because you contribute to open source. So if you can prove yourself and you can prove that you have an open source out there, they will gladly send you free software your way. And the reason for that is obviously if you're using it on your spare time, you're going to use it in your 9-to-5 day-by-day job. So they benefit, you benefit, so that's awesome. Open source obviously is a community and it's a concept. So first of all, we work together in the community space to make software for everyone to use out there. In fact, I don't think you can start a project in any language these days without using some kind of an open source component. That can be your IDE, that can be some of your libraries. But the idea is that we build on the shoulders of giants, right? That's the whole point. I don't have to go and reinvent Angular because I want to use a framework for the web. Somebody else has already done it, and we have contributions out there. For me personally, I like open source because it also gives you the freedom to fix stuff. So if it was a product that you were using, a closed source project that somebody else has released, then if you find a bug, you have to wait for their next upcoming release, which can be in 6 months down the line. With open source, you can grab the source code, you can fix it at your own pace, and then you can either contribute back or carry on with your tasks. So that's the whole idea. It makes us moving faster and faster as a community and as developers. Now, how do you get started? I think I've convinced you for the selfish and selfish reasons about how to contribute. So how do you get started? You've never done it before. Everyone's talking about it. So where do I go? There are lots of sites out there that will allow you to do that. GitHub is the go-to place now for all the open source stuff. And there's a lot of software and a lot of websites like Up for Grabs or My First PR or First Timers Only that I'll actually share some of the links later on. But the idea is that we now have places that you can go as a first-time contributor and find easy tasks to get started. Some of the tasks are also marked as intermediate or advanced or beginner. So it's easy to go and grab something that might be easy. It doesn't have to be software. It doesn't have to be code. It can, in fact, be documentation. These days, I contribute a lot by just writing documentation and contributing to that because that helps other people working that. In fact, my contribution to the ASP.NET Core stuff that shows up nicely on my GitHub, it was just fixing a sentence in one of the documentation. And yet that shows up in my GitHub repo. That's insane, right? Another thing I forgot is that you might improve your employability as an open source contributor, because sometimes if you contribute to projects that a lot of people use, that becomes your testimony of your quality as a developer, right? So if you are contributing a lot of code, then it might be easier for your employer to go and look into your GitHub repo and realize that you're doing some serious work over there. It's not just that. So anyway, other things that you can do, you go to those websites, you find a repo, you find a project that you're passionate about, or you really, really hate. Like you have to use it every single day and it's crap. So you go, right, we can fix it. We can find better software there, or we can do it better ourselves. So find a project that you're passionate about. Find a project that's also active. If something has stopped being contributed to 5 years ago, there's no point of you doing it now. And then obviously find a project that you agree with the license, because we do know that there are different open source licenses out there. So sometimes GPL over MIT, people do have preferences about these things. So we found the project. Next thing you need to do is reach out to the maintainer and say, I would like to fix this. I have found a bug, or I have an issue, or a feature that I would like to add in. Reach out, start the communication channel, because you need to make sure that you don't spend 2 weeks writing software that the maintainer may already have in the backlog, or they may have already fixed for you. So make it public. Raise an issue. If you find a bug, please attach some documentation and say, I'm going to start working with that. And lastly, learn how to use Git, because that's one of the prereqs for working with open source. Whether we like it or not, this is the de facto language now for working with repositories and repos and pull requests and so on. Learn the 9 basic commands, and then this should take you through all the way. You're rarely going to go outside the porcelain commands, as they call them. But anyway, Git, find a repo, and start contributing. It can be anything, documentation. It can be a graphic design. It can be a website that the site needs. Or it can be fixing unit tests or adding unit tests. You don't have to contribute to the core code. So that's how you can get started. I started with documentation, moved into code, and then back into documentation. So it can be anything. If you are already contributing to open source, you probably know that you need a contributing MD. So that's a file that actually explains how to other people how to contribute. So if you are approaching a project for the first time, make sure you read the instructions. Please do not change the coding styles for the repo, because that can be detrimental for your pull request. Follow the instructions, find what software you need to install, and reach out again, communicate. If you get stuck, reach out again and ask questions. Most of the community is very welcoming and open, and they will help you and support you through the way. But please follow the guidelines. If there are no guidelines, reach out and find out about them, because I know some people like documentation or comments in the code. Some people don't like them. Some people like tabs over spaces. You don't want to go into that fight again. So please stick with the guidelines. Now, if you are a maintainer again, please put some guidelines out there. Don't expect people to come and contribute without you telling them what the expectations are, and then push back their pull requests. So that's an important side of things. If you have an open source project as well, make sure that you put a license, because companies won't be able to use your code, even if it's awesome code, only because you don't have a license. So an MIT license or another open source license that makes your software for consumption. Otherwise, even if it's in the public domain, it doesn't mean it's open source. It's open, but it's not open source, and it's not for consumption. Other things, please be welcoming to the community. A lot of us had to start from nothing, and my first pull request was to the NuGet repository and the documentation, and Jeff was really kind in accepting my pull request and guiding me through the process at 12 a.m. at night, my time. I was like blurry eyes trying to do my first pull request. I had no idea what that meant, but the idea is that he helped me along the way, and if it wasn't for Jeff, I wouldn't be here today. So try to be welcoming if people have questions. I know it takes time of you for you to contribute, but please be welcoming and help out as much as you can. And I know things sometimes go bad. I know that sometimes circumstances in our life change. And if you are a maintainer and you find that you have kids, or you move to another country, or your circumstances have changed, please put a banner out there saying, this is a project I used to work. If anybody wants to take over, please reach out to me. Otherwise, I will not be maintaining that. So that lets other people know that you have done something that's changed in your life. And when things go really bad, we do have code of conduct these days, unfortunately, that we need to attach to our open source, just to let people know how to behave. Surprisingly enough, when you do open source, you'll find that people have that kind of false entitlement into your code, and they will demand crazy things from you and for you. So unless they're paying for your time, please don't feel pressure to do anything for them. But otherwise, I hope that some of you will join us in the open source community. You'll feel inspired about contributing to projects that you're passionate about. And if you have any questions, then feel free to reach out to me or anybody else in here, because most of us are doing open source. Thank you very much for listening, guys.